Hi, everybody, and thank you for spending your Sunday afternoon with us. And actually, I don't think there's much incentive. You get to spend Sunday afternoon with Shobhaa Day talking about her sensual self. I mean, what better thing could you be doing? Um, I lose track, Shobha, so let me first of all ask you, what number book is this?
Sometimes I lose track too, but I believe it's the 28th. But before we get to that, thank you so very much. 17th edition, and it's wonderful to be back. I think I've been at 15 of those 17 editions so far. It's a great feeling. It's wonderful to see an audience on a Sunday afternoon, which also shows Kolkata's respect for ideas, for conversations, and for books. So thank you all for being here. Thank you so much.
We'll, we'll get, yes, you can clap anytime. We'll get going because we don't have much time. You know, we only have half an hour for this session. And as we were saying, do you do half hours?
I'm not Jerry Pinto, so I'm happy to do 15 minutes also if I have an attentive audience. So I'm absolutely fine. There's no ego involved. It's an opportunity for any writer to be able to talk to readers and to meet other authors. So let's make it a meaningful half an hour.
Oh, there we go. Well, this book, in the introduction, you say, my children call me a prude. Nobody believes them. They laugh when I change the subject if it turns raunchy. So the question is, how and why does a self-confessed prude write a book on the sensual self?
Well, to start with, the sensual self is not the sexual self. There's a very big difference. So my idea was to remind ourselves about what sensuality is, what it means, because it's been a lifelong search for me. It's not a subject I take lightly. It's been something that has not just intrigued me, but in many ways made me ask myself a lot of questions. That at which stage did we as Indians lose track of all that was sensual about our everyday lives? It's not about what happens in the bedroom. It's about beauty. It's about touch. It's about fragrance. It's about food. It's about the little acts every day between yourselves as a family and certainly with your partner that can enhance your life in a wonderful way if you're mindful, aware that at some point we lost track, and at some point we can always come back to something that was precious, and actually it was something so rich that enriched us so much. And then the British came along and boom, that was gone. It was, what they brought in with them was as bland as their cuisine. And they completely, in a way, hijacked our sensual existence and made it into something like blancmange, like bland and tasteless and something we had to be ashamed of rather than celebrate. Till that point, whether it was our music, our sculpture, our dance, our colors, every state with its very individual kind of take on what makes life beautiful, colorful, sensual. And then we were like one blob of one kind of a culture which was dictated to by Victorian norms. And we were made to feel somehow embarrassed and ashamed of all that in the past we had enjoyed and celebrated.
In fact, there's a book out by Sindhu Rajasekaran which talks exactly about many of the things you're talking about from a queer context, but about how the British came and took away fluidity. That sensuality is a lot about fluidity, and a lot of what they did was wanting to put everything in a little box, like a petticoat of its own. Everything has its own petticoat. Yeah. But in terms of, when you say we lost track and this distinction between sexual and sensual, was that something you had to learn yourself? Or was that something you were always aware of?
Very much. As growing up as a young girl, I remember, I think a lot of us, especially of my generation, grew up with so many inhibitions. We were somehow made to feel ashamed of of being girls, and therefore we had to take extra precautions because the world was full of aggressive and dangerous males out there who would have assaulted us, raped us, harmed us, violated us. And that's sort of ingrained into our thinking from the age of maybe 3 or 4, that you'll always tell a girl, don't ever step out unless you're fully clad. And I remember all of that. But I also remember clearly, and it's mentioned in the book, because there's no point in talking about something theoretically, academically, if you can't acknowledge it in your own life. And only then can it be authentic when you're sharing something that you have felt and felt deeply about. So I remember feelings which were distinctly sexual, maybe from the age of 7, 8. And I think most of us would, if we care to look back. But there was so much guilt. Who could you have such a conversation with? Who can you, why at that stage, it's not even as if you can share those feelings because you're confused yourself that what are these feelings? Am I supposed to feel bad about myself because I'm feeling something that's not natural, normal, though it very much is, but who do you have these conversations with? So in many ways, I was going back to my childhood, going back to my growing up years, my teenage years, my first awareness of myself as a woman, marriage, pregnancy, post, what happens, when does a woman sort of start losing touch with what gave her immense pleasure? Because life overwhelms her. And when you look at a woman's life and analyze any woman's life, uh, it's either you are, well, it starts with your being premenstrual, then you're menstrual for a very long time, then comes in between marriage and its dynamics with your partner, which may or may not be pleasurable. Then comes pregnancy, then comes post-pregnancy depression, and this pre-pregnancy anxiety. Then comes the question about your own body being out of shape, and therefore you're ashamed of that. Therefore, you can't be with your partner in a way that gives both of you any pleasure. After that comes perimenopause. Then comes menopause. By then, a woman's life is over. It's the majority of her years are spent being anxious about her body and the perception of the world about her body, her own feelings about her body, and all the accompanying, insecurities. So sensuality has to be something beyond just the body. It has to be in the mind. It has to be something that triggers your imagination in a beautiful way. Like there is no time frame for sensuality or even for sexual imagination. It doesn't mean all that comes to an end when you're in your 60s or 70s or 80s. The imagination never grows old. Memories of pleasurable moments never date.
So now, do you find more pleasure in the memories, or do you find more pleasure in imagining what might be in the future?
What a personal question. You think I'm going to answer
There's
that?
just a few people here.
Whether there are few or 5,000, it's still an intrusive question. So I will not directly answer you. I will say that my husband and I are both acutely aware of one another's physical presence. And we do not take it for granted, and we respect it. Because a good partnership, where sexual, sensual, begins with respecting each other's physical beings. And if that isn't there at whichever age, then there is really very little that you can fall back on much later in life, when even a gentle touch, a caress, a gentle kiss, a pat on the forehead, a hug that's meant can lift your day and take it to another level, which in your younger days, maybe you take it so much for granted and you don't really pay attention to it. These days, we pay attention to every little touch between one another and value it, and it's precious to us.
That, I think, deserves a round of applause. Now, if I don't have it wrong, when you started out, long before you could be called an aunt, you did an agony aunt column. How long ago was that?
About 100.
About 100 years ago. So 100 years ago, when you were doing the agony aunt column, I'm curious, do you remember what kind of questions, agonies people would come to write with?
Yes, I do remember quite well because I was ghosting that column for Simi Garewal, uh, who was working for the publisher at the time, Nari Hira, and she didn't have the time to write, but I enjoyed those columns because most of the questions were made up by us anyway. And it wasn't that, we were getting letters and letters from readers asking, deeply intimate questions. So I was having a lot of fun with that column. But most of it used to be pretty innocent. The letters we did receive were about, the boy next door and, he's been ignoring me for the last 5 days and does it mean that he doesn't love me anymore? Very, very innocent questions. But today when I read a lot of columns in newspapers, they're very explicit. They're very out there. They're almost like sex manuals. It's a big shift.
So, in that sense, do you think we have become more sexual but less sensual, or has sensuality kept pace with this overt expression of sexuality?
I don't even think we've become more sexual. Had it been
We
so,
just talk about it.
No, we don't just talk about it. It's the most intimate, the most exciting relationship young people are having is with their phone. They barely make eye contact with each other. I've seen young couples in restaurants on dates. And they are not talking to each other. They're talking to random people, scrolling, looking at Instagram. There's nothing happening between them. And a lot of young people I meet also tell me that they don't miss it, they don't want it. And their idea of a sexual encounter has zero emotional investment. It's like you meet someone at a bar, and I talk to young people all the time, and one girl in Pune in particular, it's a very amusing story. How many minutes do we have? Oh, we have enough.
time.
Okay. And so she turned around and she said to me, I believe in hookups. At that moment, I wasn't completely clear what hookups meant in very explicit terms. I said, what does that mean? She said, like, last week I met a guy at a bar, and he said, can I buy you a drink? I know exactly what that meant. And I said, yes, because he was cute. So after that drink, he said, do you want to come home with me? And I know what that meant too. And he was cute. I liked his abs and all of it. So I said, fine, sure, let's go. So they went home, and she said to me, very earnestly and sweetly, she said, ma'am, have you ever had this pink gin that's made in Jaipur? So I hadn't, and I'd not heard of it even. So she said, oh my God, that gin in that guy's house. I said, okay, so, beyond the gin? She said, who cares? Who remembers? I remember the gin. I don't even remember the man's name. That is the reality. It's to her the memory of the gin, and she still sends me messages, have you tried it yet? Have you tried it yet? That's how powerful that impact of that gin was. The man was incidental. And she says, in one evening, I can meet maybe 3 guys, and it'll be the same to me. Only the gin
is
depends
special.
on who serves her which gin.
Perhaps she wasn't more in touch with her sensual self than her sexual self in
Quite
this
possible,
case.
or with both.
Or with both.
Yeah, I'd like to think that.
But so do you think we need, we always talk about a sexual revolution. Do you think we need a sensual revolution?
Oh, for sure. Thank you for saying that. I'm going to steal it immediately. For my Lit Fest next, the sensual revolution. It sounds wonderful. Yes, but you're so right. Because, there is so much around us. Like, it sounds maybe a little absurd, but even the eating, 2 people or at a table eating a wonderful fruit together, but really eating it and looking at each other, eating it and enjoying it, is in itself like a complete act and can lead to wonderful things. Like in the book, I've emphasized how powerful hand-holding can be. Hand-holding, which you take so much for granted, but so much can be communicated in sensual and sexual terms, just holding hands. It's a way of showing trust. It's a way of showing love, desire. The way you hold someone's hand conveys so much. It can be a prelude to something much more later. Like I've written extensively on the kiss, because I think most of us in India do not know how to kiss, because it's not considered too much a part of our, what shall I say, even social conduct. That whole Muamma culture is only 10 years old, but that's not a kiss. A proper kiss is like, you know, when you look at Gustav Klimt and you look at that kiss, the way he's holding her, the angle at which she's held, the tenderness with which he's supporting her head, his fingers are in her hair, their body language is so poetic. And then what happens next? Your imagination can figure out the rest. But here it's not somehow even considered important enough to kiss in a gentle, beautiful way. You don't attack your partner's mouth. A man doesn't assault a woman's mouth. He doesn't assault her body in the, like, I mean, it's got to be something that has, it's like a crescendo to follow, but start with something like, you know, when you listen to Ravel's Bolero, for example, the way it starts, it builds up, and then it ends in a certain wonderful and very dramatic way. I wish that we could go back to our rag. Most of our rags, when you start with an alap, and then it builds. In the book, I've suggested that making love to a rag, and the right rag at the right time of the day, what you play, a Bhairavi, if you're making love in the morning, what stops you from having that as a background score? Or a
Perhaps
rag Yaman,
impatient.
or, yeah,
Perhaps
what?
impatient. I think with social media, we do want more and more. We look for instant gratification. So, like, okay, Alap, let's hurry on. Let's fast forward to the action.
But it's awful because it's become so transactional. It's like you said, like, let's get on with it. But what if they slowed down and didn't immediately get on with it? Maybe they'll discover something pretty powerful, which they might actually want to continue to explore.
One of the things you write in the book very openly, which you just talked about, is the insecurity people feel with their bodies, when it comes to being in touch with your sensual self. And you say women especially feel that. And I think you probably share it with gay men too. Gay men are, and probably that's why gay men and women do get along often. For you, since you started modeling so early in your career and your looks were so much on covers of magazines, people would have thought you didn't have that insecurity. But did you have it all along, or how was that?
Honestly, I have never met a single woman in my life, including the most stunning, the most beautiful women in the world. If Marilyn Monroe could be insecure about her body and her looks and herself and her power, who's anyone else? It's something that goes beyond just physical perfection. I think perhaps we look for validation constantly because society makes you aware that you have to appear in a certain way in order, at least in the old days, in order to get a good husband. That was your cachet. So your family made you insecure. You're not fair enough, you're not tall enough, you don't have enough glossy black hair on your head, your nose is a bit off. All these imperfections in today's day and age can be fixed if you have the resources. In those days, if you were born a certain way, well, you had to live with that. And very often, society, your family, didn't make you very comfortable about those aspects of yourself.
But can they be fixed? I mean, once
Today,
you fix,
now.
but even if you fix them, does that insecurity go away? And I don't
Never.
want to name names, but I
No.
see the reels of people from Bollywood who are, suddenly lost immense amount of weight or whatever, and they look scary now, and you wonder what's going on.
Well, we know what's going on.
We know what's going on, but
They've just gone to the wrong cosmetic surgeon. But the thing about it is this, and I'm not being judgmental, if they feel it's going to further their career and they have to look a certain way to present themselves on screen, or there's no career. If they undertake any of those, well, good luck to them. But it can become addictive, and these days I notice younger and younger and younger star aspirants, as young as 19, 20, 21, even before they've had a single movie offer, getting themselves fixed up. Once you start getting yourself fixed up, there's no going back. You can't stop because it's like Dorian Gray, suddenly everything collapses. That's what you're talking about, the disasters, because maybe they try to fix and undo what's already non-fixable, and it gets worse.
And maybe they don't have friends who tell them stop.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah.
One of the really lovely things about this book is because you trace your own journey over the years, is you also talk about something that books about sensual self, not that there are that many out there, rarely touch on, which is about what happens to our sensual selves as we age.
Yeah.
Especially in our media portrayals we have, especially for women, as they age, you can at best be like a cougar, or you get to be a sweet, sexless grandma type figure, Leela Mishra type role, kind of very sweet and cheery, but uh, to be older and still in touch with your sensual self is not something we see a lot of in media and popular culture. And I know many of your books, the women in them, have become subjects of many dissertations because those women's characters that you've written about don't really get much play otherwise in other aspects of culture, don't talk about those things. So, can you talk about that in terms of aging and retaining a hold on your sensual self and not being like this now needs to be put away in cupboards with mothballs and my Kashmiri shawls?
Well, we live in a very ageist world, not just in India, across the world. Growing old is almost a crime. And particularly for women, the world can be extremely cruel. And the stereotype that you mentioned, you have to become a very non-threatening, like a Leela Mishra kind of a harmless little granny. But most women, society renders them invisible. They're just simply not seen after a certain age. They cease to exist. They don't register. They walk into a room, and chances are their presence itself is ignored. That is the reality. And the cougars, I think in India, it's still a term which is much more Hollywood driven, or maybe some of the OTT platforms are picking up on it. But our society simply does not encourage women of a certain age to project sensuality, sexuality, or any kind of an appeal, because it's very, very intimidating to society to accommodate these women. Where do you fit them in? Every woman is given a role from the time she's born. Once she's had her kids, once she's a grandmother, what do you do with her? Then she'd better just stay home and mind her own business and stay out of harm. I mean, leave the rest of the world alone and possibly sit there and knit a Kashmiri type shawl for her grandkids. But basically, she has to make herself either useful to her family, in which case she may get some respect, otherwise she's a liability, and mostly she's an embarrassment. That is a fact. So how we negotiate our way in the world is entirely up to us. Can we as women take agency over ourselves, over our bodies, our age, our everything? So each time I repeat my age, it's to say and emphasize that, please, for heaven's sake, you don't have to be apologetic about any aspect of your age. You are that age, and be proud of that age. And no matter how you look, nothing can stop you from doing whatever it is you want to do at 60. I'm 78. I'm closer to 80 than any other age right now. And I want to tell women here who may be in their 50s, 60s, I don't think there'll be anyone my age in the room, that, oh, there is, oh, thank you. I'm not the only person. Okay. That if I were to turn into that other kind of society-endorsed harmless old lady, I'd be so bored with myself. So anything to keep boredom at bay. And I think we all have our own means of of self-expression. And that doesn't come with an age limit either. There's nothing that can stop any woman at any age from expressing herself and also being who she is, comfortable in her own skin.
And at some point over this journey, did you feel that being desired is sort of the is almost more important than even good sex?
I haven't really thought about it, but I guess, yeah, to be not desired can be really quite heartbreaking for a human being, not just women. To be not considered worthy of anyone's attention or desire can really be very sad. So I haven't thought about it, but you've given me something to think about.
We'll open this up for questions. And you know, just hearing her talk, why Amitav Ghosh has called her a national treasure. But this is a sort of national treasure we don't put away in a cupboard as, on a pedestal kind of thing. This is a very down-to-earth national treasure, living national treasure. So you can ask whatever you like to this kind of national treasure. If you put up your hand, we'll get a mic to you. We have just a few minutes. We'll take one question in the front.
You mentioned about the sensual self, the paradigm being driven by the Victorian prodicionists, but you talked about today's generation and you talk with the younger generation. Social media, now increasingly AI, instant gratification. So how do you see the evolution of sensual self? And if I may use the word, what would you prescribe should be the, if I again use best practices that should be followed?
Well, social media and now AI looming, it's going to be an enormous challenge to get people's attention back to themselves, forget the people around them. It's so heady. It's a change that is so dramatic, so sudden. And for young people to be able to process that change and have to stay in the same place and survive and thrive and make some things of their lives, it's very, very hard. But the kind of also inputs that they seem to consume a lot of are kind of anti-sensuality. The porn that they consume so much of. Very young children today, I'm talking about school kids, like 8, 10-year-olds, even younger, they can access whatever they want. So they are looking at all of this, and in so many ways, their imagination is getting impacted so strongly. But I'm an optimist. At the end of the day, as human beings, we are emotional creatures. We are wired to desire love, to receive love, and to give love. That's what makes us different. That's what love making is about. The rest is copulation or fornication at best. But even in the animal kingdom, there's something like love and loyalty in certain species and monogamy. And they don't behave like a lot of human beings behave. In fact, we can learn so much from them.
Let's take another question.
And then that's it.
That's it.
Can I go?
Yeah.
Hi. So I'm a 68-year-old who's raised 2 girls in California till the 30s. And
Do you want to stand up? I think people might like to see you
okay.
because they're craning their necks.
Sure.
Thank you.
So I'm a 68-year-old who raised 2 girls in California to their 30s. And I actually addressed a group of about 200 parents and told the parents of boys to please ask their boys to flirt with my daughters because they were in their phones and it validates what you were saying. And I said my girls are not growing up into women because they are not being, their legs are not being pulled, they're not being flirted with, etc., etc. Coming to the question, I've always believed since my 40s, I guess, that our generation, at least the boys or the men, lost a little bit of their gallantry, and the women lost a little bit of their coquetry because we became equals, we became um, emancipated. So would you agree or disagree with that assessment?
Agree a bit, disagree a bit, because coquetry is something. I think it's an intrinsic, natural quality. If it has been suppressed, uh, it's a pity, because what you mentioned, I agree with that part of it a lot. What is flirtation today? No one has a time for it. Don't you know the meaning of flirtation? They don't know how to woo a woman. In fact, the word woo and courtship, which I've used in the book, a lot of young people come, they're genuinely puzzled. They said, what does courtship mean? What do you mean by a suitor? Who is a suitor? They're alien terms. There's just, get on with it, as you said. So, but I'm really an optimist. I believe we'll come full circle, and we will come back to the old-fashioned ways of appreciating one another, appreciating beauty, and intimacy is going to be the next big comeback. I can guarantee that. I can feel it, because it's something we miss. And I'm sure the younger generation at some point will also miss it, because we are wired to love, like I said. And touch is very much a part of that.
And I agree with you. I agree with you in that it'll come back. And I was predicting 30 years ago or 20 years ago that it'll come back in a couple of generations, and then we'll all be normal again.
No, normal, which is well, that's a very optimistic note for us to end on. Will you be signing books?
I would, be happy to sign books. Yeah,
So, for anyone who didn't get to ask a question but wants to ask you can get your book signed and ask a question. But please join me in thanking Shobhaa for spending the afternoon with us.
Thank you, Sandip. You were wonderful as always. Thank you so very much.